It's finally Friday.
It's Friday, Friday.
Thank God it's
All right, welcome back to the Friday Show, presented this week by the High Five Jackpot Carryover at Woodbine. It's now up to $1.4 million, and there's a mandatory payout on the last race tomorrow, so make sure you get involved in that. Plus, the Woodbine Mile is the race before it, and it's fantastic, and we want to talk about that in a couple of minutes. But first, Ray, there's been a lot of stuff going on. I don't know how else to explain it. There are several things we want to talk about. Let's start with the video that appeared online of Jorge Navarro, the trainer, and one of his owners watching a race from Gulfstream Park. They're actually at Monmouth, and they're saying a lot of disturbing things. Let's take a listen.
Adios, amigos. The Juice Man.
Is that a Navarro? Is that a Navarro 2-to-1?
That's the juice.
That's the way we do it.
That's the vegetable juice. We everyone. And I line my pockets with the bookie with another 20,000.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Life is great. El Hugo.
Right, there's a lot going on here. You know, talking about juicing, talking about bookies. These guys have been slapped with fines, $5,000 fines for conduct detrimental to racing. But should this thing be going deeper?
Well, I've always thought that racing commissions need to do more than just investigate and ask people questions. There's an example here with the allegation that Randall Jindy, the owner, saying that he's lined his pockets with $20,000 from the bookie. They should request his phone records, and he should prove to them that he's not betting with a bookmaker. Maybe they've done this. It's not in the ruling that came out. And the Racing Commission is going to hear this case next week with the recommendation from the stewards that the fines be increased to $20,000 for Jindy and $10,000 for Jorge Navarro. But again, you can't just take their word for it or anybody's word for it. Investigate and verify that what they're saying is true.
If they don't have the teeth to do that right now, they certainly need to get the teeth, because otherwise it's just useless. I mean, we're going to talk about Juan Vasquez here in a minute. Same kind of thing where he's had dozens of medication violations, and he gets his suspension reduced. Now, in this case, some of the racetracks have come forward and said, we're not going to take Navarro's entries, or we're not going to give him stalls. We're going to scratch his horse from the Indiana race. So, you know, the other tracks, have, to their credit, have stepped up and said, this doesn't look good. You guys can't do that. We can't tolerate this whatsoever. But when you look at the fact that, you know, I think Navarro might be getting some stalls at parks, I mean, that's ridiculous. The fact that he's getting them in another racetrack when all these other racetracks have said no way.
Well, I think we all need to let the New Jersey Racing Commission do their job, and maybe they'll do more than a fine, an additional fine. The $5,000 was the maximum the stewards could impose. I don't want to jump to any conclusions, but I do want the New Jersey Racing Commission to actually investigate and not just say, did you bet with the bookmaker? No, I didn't bet with the bookmaker. Okay, fine, thank you. You know, associating with a bookmaker is grounds to have your license revoked as an owner or as a trainer. It's a serious charge, and unfortunately, too many racing commissions don't take these kind of charges seriously enough. And as far as Navarro is concerned, people are very suspicious of him strictly because of his win percentage. Now, maybe that's unfair, but I would hope that they are doing everything they can in terms of security, surveillance, and out-of-competition testing, barn searches, all of that sort of thing, because, you know, when he says that's the way we do it, we screw everyone.
Yeah.
That's a disturbing admission.
Exactly. Now, on the other hand, this week in Iowa, a ruling came down, or a few days ago in Iowa, Prairie Meadows, you know, an alert security guard saw something, heard something, followed up on it, saw a guy putting something behind a bale of hay, went up to him and said, "What do you got in your hand?" He turned it over to her. Turns out it was 2 loaded syringes unknown substance. But the stewards, the action that they took after investigating this is they banned him from the racetrack. They took his license away. They took the vet's license away, who was also involved in the situation and appeared to have lied. And they suspended the trainer, who might not even have had knowledge, for a year. You look at that versus what's going on, at parks and in Pennsylvania racing in general. Let's talk about Juan Vasquez, because that's the situation where he seems to just be slipping through the cracks everywhere you look. Yeah,
the reports on Juan Vasquez is kind of the stepchild for bad behavior in horse racing. Hitting a jockey. He bounced a check with a racing commission when he had to pay a fine, $100 penalty for that. He received 2 suspensions for 90 days. And this is after getting dozens of medication violations. 90-day suspension reduced by the commission to 60 days. What, for good behavior? And then he sends a horse up to Suffolk Downs in Massachusetts, gets a positive test there, and he gets a 30-day suspension, which overlaps with the Pennsylvania suspension. Right. It is a joke.
Meanwhile, the horses in his stable are still in his stable. Right? And they're being trained by a different trainer. So I'm sure it's not possible that he's talking, Vasquez is communicating and really training the horses through this other guy. But my guess is that Pennsylvania, based on their track record, is not going to do a damn thing about it, because they really have proven that they don't care. All they care about is having enough horses. And in this case, what really baffles me is that he owns most of the horses. So it's not like other owners will be complaining, griping, going, you can't kick him off because we liked having our horses with him. No, he owns most of the horses. So it doesn't make any sense to me.
Well, if you referenced, is he calling his assistant trainers and actually having them do what he says, tell him what races to enter and all that sort of thing. A few years ago, New York actually looked at cell phone records of a trainer during a suspension to see if he was having any contact with his barn. Do you think the Pennsylvania Racing Commission is going to look at cell phone records of the assistant trainers, or of Juan Vasquez, or of Carlos Milian, the trainer who all of a sudden is in charge of the Vasquez horses? Do you think the Pennsylvania Racing Commission is going to do that?
No, of course I don't. But it also makes me think about Rick Dutrow. He had dozens of medication violations. He gets a 10-year ban from the sport. And this guy, he gets a 90-day reduced to a 60-day, overlapped with a 30-day. And, they're just looking the other way, just letting him do his thing, despite his ridiculously bad track record that included, theft charges, as you pointed out, writing a bad check, to pay a fine. I mean, that's a joke. That is an embarrassment. And it is a black eye for the game to allow this to happen. And this takes us back once again to the need for national oversight of some sort, a commissioner, an office, something.
I have nothing else to say. It is just mind-boggling. He runs a lot of horses in Pennsylvania, and that's why they let him do it, because he runs a lot of horses, and that keeps the racing office happy.
All right, let's move on and talk about good racing. The Woodbine Mile this weekend, the Ricoh Woodbine Mile. It's race 12 on the card tomorrow. There's a 12-horse field, and it looks very competitive. You've got a former winner in there. Ray, how do you see this race?
Well, it's a wide-open race, 12 horses. They come from all over the world. So naturally, I ended up with a favorite, Deauville. One of 2 that Aidan O'Brien is sending over from Europe. I just think Deauville outclasses the field. If he handles the course, I think he's the winner.
Yeah, I don't know how good he actually is, and I don't even know how good some of these other horses are, compared to, say, a Tepin. So I'm going to go for a long shot here, and what I found while looking through the past performances is, man, a lot of these horses have really bad records at a mile. they don't seem to like this distance. So I'm going to go with one that does, and also is 6 for 10 at Woodbine. The horse's name is Glenville Gardens. The number 12, 20-1 morning line. I think he's got a shot. I really do.
If you play a lot of tickets in that race, save some money for the last race, because as you know, there's a $1.4 million carryover in that jackpot, and it's a mandatory payout.
Yeah, it's the high five. You know, you got to pick the top 5 finishers of the race.
Should be easy.
And yeah. And there's a 13 horse field, so it's obviously a challenge. But with all that money, you know, in there, the payout is going to be way above what it should be. So you got to get in on it. Make sure it's race number 13 on the card at Woodbine tomorrow. All right, that's going to do it. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.